You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome, fellow patriots. Get ready for an hour of unabashedly pro-American, pro-conservative, and pro-biblical principles. This is the Blake Johnson Program.
Well, hello America, welcome to it. This is the Blake Johnson Program, and you're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network, where always we are here to fix the machine. Hope you've enjoyed your week. We have a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to talk about a variety of topics. We'll delve into a story that the mainstream media just simply won't talk about, and if you're familiar at all with the mainstream media and where they typically align their agenda, you won't be surprised at the fact that they are completely and utterly ignoring this story, when I think it is one of the most important stories of the year, of the decade, maybe of our lifetime. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Also, I want to talk about maybe a little bit about North Korea, the situations going on there. Also share with you a story involving Amazon and how they seem to be silencing voices on the right, particularly the Christian right, while also propping up very bigoted, hateful groups that are Muslim. So that's interesting. But first, I want to spend some time here on this topic that I really struggled with. I'll just be honest with you. I really struggled with figuring out how I was going to discuss this with you, because I thought about it in a whole variety of ways. I thought, well, you could just go to the traditional route and just talk about the story and react to that story, pure and simple, just your typical radio commentary. Then I thought about maybe there's a couple of different avenues I could take. But ultimately, as is the case with, at least I try to make this the case with most topics, I want to approach this in the realm of principles. Where do our principles come in when they involve these stories? Sometimes I talk about things that are just fun topics, like Star Wars, like Marvel. I'm going to talk about the Avengers Infinity War movie later on in the show. Don't worry, I won't give any spoilers away just yet. I'll just give you a brief take on the overall feelings I had over the movie. So yeah, sometimes I talk about topics on this show that are just, more lighthearted, more just, kick back and relax. But I do try to cover stories that truly do matter and that speak a lot about who we are as a people. So with that in mind, I want to talk to you about, and I covered this obviously before the big news came out last week. I covered the general idea of this on the last week's episode. But I want to discuss the latest controversies, discussions surrounding President Trump and the stormy-daniels lawsuit against him, and the seemingly stunning revelation made by his, is he like his official lawyer, attorney? He's part of his new legal team. He just started. And he went on the Sean Hannity Fox News show last week and admitted that, President Trump, at the time, he fully reimbursed Michael Cohen, the lawyer for the Trump family for many years. He reimbursed him because Michael Cohen took it upon himself to pay Stormy Daniels $130,000 to keep quiet about the affair that she had with Donald Trump. And that Trump, even though he didn't know exactly what was going on, he believed in his lawyer and he didn't want anything to get out, so therefore he used his own money, didn't use campaign money, allegedly. And so yeah, that's the story. Basically admitting, obviously, the affair that took place, but also, yeah, President Trump, he did pay hush money, ultimately, to this porn star to keep quiet. And the world reacts in a variety of very predictable ways. The left, of course, is in a frenzy. Can't get enough of this story. That's all you hear about on CNN, MSNBC, and all these other liberal outlets, both on TV and internet. They love to talk about this all day long. Meanwhile, ignore some other really important stories. But this story is important because, again, it does go back to what does this say about us as a people. So that's how the left's reacting. The right, many factions of the right, are reacting in a variety of ways. You have the always Trump people who defend everything that this man says and does, says, well, none of us are perfect, and, we didn't elect a pastor. We elected someone who was going to go into Washington and shake things up, and they're always going to stand by him no matter what. Then you have those who are troubled by it, but ultimately, as long as they're getting tax breaks, as long as the job numbers are going up, as long as we're not at war, as long as, their own world is comfortable, they're not really going to say anything. But until it hits home to them, until it affects them, until that happens, they will continue to support this president no matter what. So they're basically like the always Trump, but it centers more around them personally than Trump himself. And then you have those, like myself, who are deeply troubled by this, who, while at the same time, I am very happy with some of the things that the president has done as president, as the leader of the free world, I am also very troubled by what he has done in the past, what he's doing today, his personal life, and quite frankly, why I think that is leading, that still influences him today, and it influences him to still be a complete scumbag. And that's not going to sit well with many people. In fact, many of you who may be listening may not like that kind of language that I used, but that's just how I see it. So before bumping the microphone for just a second there. Before I continue on, let me just start by asking you a question. Does a person's private life, does a person's personal life, does that matter to their public life? Does what somebody does in their private life, the way somebody lives and believes, do you believe that affects their public life? Do you believe that affects their position as a leader? If not, why not? You see, we've seen many examples in the past. And I'm not just talking about extramarital affairs. I'm talking about people who lie, who deceive, who cheat in their own private life, and then they bring that into their public life. And that does affect how they live and how they behave. The right was in a frenzy during the 90s when Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, was caught in a scandal with Monica Lewinsky, lying under oath that he did not have sexual relations with her, that he was completely clean. And then we come to find out, no, he did. He actually did do those things. And the right was calling for impeachment. They called for him to step down. They said he's a moral disgrace. He's an animal. How could he do this to a woman? But now the right seems to be silent, virtually silent. Many, at least, of the mainstream voices on the right are silent when it comes to President Trump's behavior. Now, understand, there is some differences between what happened with Bill Clinton and what's happening with President Trump. For one thing, Bill Clinton raped women, or at least it's believed to be, it's alleged, but strong indications that he did. With the Stormy-Daniels thing, completely consensual. Completely consensual. There was not an ounce of victimhood in Stormy-Daniels' body. She completely was okay with it. She wanted it because she wanted the money, as she still wants the money today. However, do those differences really take away from the impact of that lifestyle, of those choices? Does it really matter, you think? I think it does. And here's why. For one thing, no matter how hard you try, you cannot separate who you are within the core of your being from who you are in your position. You cannot do and think and believe and behave in your own private life and not expect that to affect what you do professionally, because that denies the existence of yourself. You try to live in a shell, but that shell isn't impenetrable. We saw it with Bill Clinton. We saw it with Richard Nixon. We saw it with a whole host of people in the media, in Hollywood, people that you thought were clean, possibly, or at least not quite as dirty as we now know they are. Well, it's because the slime and the sickness and the corruption that they lived, that they did in their own personal lives, affected not only themselves, but those around them. Bill Clinton ruined many people's lives with his choices. He did. Richard Nixon, the cover-up being worse than the crime. No, Richard Nixon wasn't, I don't believe, directly involved in Watergate, but he heard it by covering it up, which led to him resigning as president. Harvey Weinstein ruined so many women's lives. So many women's lives. And the lives of their loved ones, some of whom were probably married, ruined their spouses' lives. And the list goes on. Kevin Spacey, he ruined many lives. JFK, he ruined lives. I mean, you really think this is just about one person? You really think that this is, as long as that person doesn't hurt anybody else, it's fine? But isn't that the same excuse that we use for our own sin? Isn't that the same excuse that we use for our own behavior? Well, I'm not hurting anybody, so why does it matter? Why is it wrong? Sure, I'll go ahead and watch hours of porn. That's not going to affect anybody. No, it won't affect my love life. It won't affect my sex life. It won't affect the life of someone that I may wind up loving later on, but can't bring myself to get rid of this awful, awful habit. We are so focused on ourselves that we cannot, and in many cases will not, see the bigger picture. Character matters. Character is important. If you don't have character, if you don't have a foundation for your principles, then it's just like that house that's built on sand. If you know your Bible, you know your Bible stories, you know this. It's like the house built on sand. It may look great on the outside. It may look very, very attractive. But because the foundation is flawed, well, therefore, the whole thing collapses. It's only a matter of time. All it takes is a little bit of time, a little bit of temptation, a little bit of trials, a little bit of tribulation, and those things collapse. Yes, I do believe God uses anyone He chooses. He's used many people who were flawed, who were full of sin, who were corrupt. But in the end, many of them turned away from their sin. Many of them wound up forsaking the lifestyle that they once lived because God intervened. He used people like Saul, who was murdering Christians, torturing them, having them tortured, stoned, beaten, and slaughtered. And he wound up being, blinded by God, changed, transformed, turned his life around, changed his name from Saul to Paul, and then wound up writing a good portion of the New Testament. So yes, he can and does use anyone he wants to, but make no mistake, God will not be mocked. God will not simply tolerate sin. He never has, he never will. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. Any meaning, yes, even America. Even we are not invincible to God's coming wrath. That's not just me trying to be preaching about Jesus. This is me just telling you the truth, even if you don't believe in Jesus. We have so many points of evidence from history to look back and see that those who live selfish, self-righteous, corrupt, evil lives, it eventually creeps into every other aspect of their life. One day it does. So yes, character matters. And I think it is quite truly a shame that many Christians out there on social media, out there in our own country, are dismissing everything that is going on because it's someone who occasionally passes and says things that they like. That is a sickness that cannot be treated unless you fully and completely deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow Christ. Back in a minute. So I have to apologize in advance if that monologue was too long, but honestly, it was just on my heart, and I just felt like it had to be said. It really did. There are times, many times, where I just don't know what else to say. So I'll just keep speaking the truth, and just let whatever God wants to happen, happen. I do want to, before we take a break and come back with a really big story that I think is very important, I want to play for you this clip from Neil Cavuto. He's a host on Fox News. He's been a host of Your World with Neil Cavuto for a long time. I think he's one of the few remaining Fox host personalities that's been there for seemingly more than a year at this point. I don't know. It seems like they get so many new hosts, but I've always found a pretty fair amount of respect for Neil. He seems to be an honest guy who just calls it like he sees it. May not always agree with him, but he's never come across to me as someone who is just, stumping for whichever group is popular. He just says what he believes, and that's that. And I think this clip further shows that. This was on, I can't remember what day of the week it was, Wednesday or Thursday maybe. And this is after these revelations about, Rudy Giuliani making these, admissions about President Trump and Stormy Daniels. And he spends about 5 minutes, I'm not going to play the whole clip, but I'll play about half of it, of going over all the inconsistencies of the president and how he seems to be giving ammunition to those on the other side. For all his talk about claiming to drain the swamp, there doesn't seem to be a lot of draining of the swamp. So here's Neil Cavuto talking more about that. I think this is really, really good. Take a listen.
So let me be clear, Mr. President. How can you drain the swamp if you're the one who keeps muddying the waters? You didn't know about that $130,000 payment to a porn star until you did. Said you knew nothing about how your former lawyer, Michael Cohen, handled this until acknowledging today you were the guy behind the retainer payment that took care of this. You insist that money from the campaign or campaign contributions played no role in this transaction. Of that, you're sure. Thing is, not even 24 hours ago, sir, you couldn't recall any of this, and you seem very sure. Now, I'm not saying you're a liar, you're president, you're busy. I'm just having a devil of a time figuring out which news is fake. Let's just say your own words on lots of stuff give me, shall I say, lots of pause. Like the time you said the Russians didn't interfere in the 2016 election until a lot of Republicans had to remind you they did. Came back months later and you said, well, I never said that Russia didn't meddle in the election when, in fact, you had a lot. Now, none of this makes me a never-Trumper, just always confused. Like when you claimed your tax plan was the biggest in U.S. history, when it wasn't, or that the bill you signed to make it all happen would cost you a fortune, when it turns out it is going to help make you a bigger fortune, or that your job approval numbers really aren't that bad relative to other presidents at this stage, when they're actually worse than most presidents at this stage. That can change, but what's weird is this pattern does not. Like the time that you said rumors of Rex Tillerson's departure at the State Department were false until they weren't, or that your former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, wasn't going anywhere until he was, or your economic advisor, Gary Cohn, was doing a great job until he wasn't, when you absolutely loved Steve Bannon until you didn't, swore by Jeff Sessions until you started swearing at Jeff Sessions, had your legal team locked in place until it wasn't, denied reports you were ever thinking about firing Robert Mueller, even as you now threaten getting involved at the Justice Department. Again, none of this makes what you say fake. Just calling out the press for being so a bit of a stretch. You are right to say some of them are out to get you, but oftentimes they're using your own words to bash you. Your base probably might not care, but you should. I guess you've been too busy draining the swamp to ever stop and smell the stink you're creating. That's your doing. That's your stink. Mr. President, that's your swamp.
So yeah, I think that took some balls for him to say that, especially on a network like Fox News, where seemingly the majority of people, at least the people around that time slot, and especially in prime time, are very friendly to the president and everything that he does, seems like. But I thought it was very true, and again, I didn't play the whole thing, but he goes on to talk about all the other instances where he said one thing and it turned out either not to be true or he just flat out flip-flopped on it. And I mean, I think that's accurate. I mean, look, you can support the president's agenda all you want. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have to be calling for consistency. And I heard somebody say, someone who knows the president, say that Trump has a very short-term memory, meaning his mind goes all over the place and he can easily forget something that happened a couple of weeks ago because he just doesn't care enough to remember it. He doesn't write things down. He's not an idiot. He doesn't care. He just moves on, does one thing, moves on to the next thing, moves on to the next thing, and so he forgets things easily. And that's not an encouraging trait to have in the President of the United States. At least, I don't think it is. But maybe that's just me. But yeah, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier and the excuse making from those on the right. Joe Walsh, he's a former congressman who served like he served like one term and then he couldn't get reelected. So now he's a talk show host. He went to Twitter and see, people like him are weird to me because on the one hand, they trash the president for his corruption, but at the same time, they say they don't care about his corruption and they voted for him regardless. I mean, that's essentially what he's been doing. He's been spending, he's got a fair amount of people following him on Twitter. But he goes on Twitter and he starts saying how, all these people did these terrible things. And look, I don't really care. A person's personal life doesn't matter to their public life. Well, then why are you also saying I'm mad that the president is lying to the American people? Well, who cares? Who cares? If it's his life, well, why should you care if he lies to you? You see what I'm saying? The double standard here, it's so freaking annoying. It really is. Then you've got, people like Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Jeanine Pirro, others at Fox News who are making excuses for Trump, or they're just completely ignoring this whole story. You've got other people on social media who have a sizable following who just don't give a rip about this story because it just doesn't matter to them. Now look, I would rather talk about what's going on in North Korea. I would rather talk about the economy. I would rather talk about healthcare and education and technology and all these things. I would love to talk about that. I hate the fact that we are spending so much time talking about a really stupid mistake made by the President of the United States. And don't get me wrong, Stormy Daniels, she's just as disgusting and grotesque. This woman is vile. She's such a, I'm just going to say it, she is a slut. That's what she is. All she's doing is trying to get money out of this situation, and she's still doing porn. She's still banging up anyone that she can get her hands on for money. All she wants here is money and fame. That's all she cares about. She's a vile human being. But they're both messed up people. So yes, I would rather talk about the economy. I'd rather talk about all these other things. But if this is going on, then we do need to talk about it because we have to have standards. We have to be consistent. Anyway, enough of that. I've already delved a lot of time into this topic, but I want to come back, focus on something that I think is really important that I haven't heard anybody else talk about this. Anybody else in major conservative voices discuss this. And it needs to be talked about, and we will discuss it right after this break. You've been listening to the Blake Johnson program on the Lanterns Radio Network.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the Blake Johnson program. Thank you so much for listening. I don't say it enough, but I really do mean it. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show. This show does consistently well week after week, and that's not possible except for you guys. Still coming every single week to listen, to download, and hopefully to share with a friend or two about this show, and I would encourage you to do that. You can share this podcast anywhere that you want to, on social media, email, however you like to do those things. But I would encourage you to spread the word about this program, get the word out there, draw in as many people as you can, because I think the conversations that are had here are really important, and it's not because of me. I look for stories that I think really truly matter, that relate to the Christian worldview, the conservative viewpoint, the Constitution, so on and so forth. And I think those topics are very important to discuss. So it means a lot that you come here every week. And also, please, if you would, support Lanterns. Go to lanterns.buzz. We post a lot of news articles there. We have a lot of contributors at Lanterns. I like to post some things on our site as well. It's always very, very good to read, and I've actually done a couple of those stories. I've talked about them on my show before. So yeah, we have got some good writers. Also got some really good show hosts here. That I know it's a shock, but I'm not the only one who does a show on this network. But check us all out, lanterns.buzz. You can find us on the radio tab there for that. And I believe you can support us through Patreon. I'm not 100% sure how that all works, but basically, if you feel like giving us money, you can do that through Patreon. That's all I got for you. I know, I'm such a great, I do such a great job of, advertisement. But anyway, back to the show, to this really important story that I've wanted to talk about, since the show started. And I try not to use hyperbole on this show. Sometimes you'll listen to a radio host and this is the best thing I have ever read in my life. And then the next week, this is the best thing, this is the most important thing you could possibly read. I've never read anything like this, even though last week I said the very same thing. I as someone who listens to a lot of talk radio, I've heard that I don't know how many times from the same hosts too, who keep saying the same thing. And it's like, in your friend groups, you hear friends talk about a movie that they went and saw. Oh, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Really? Is it? No, I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying, don't always have to say it's the best or it's the worst. Sometimes it's just good. Sometimes it's just meh. But I do think this particular story is very important. It's very important because it relates to abortion. Now, I guess it's a common thing in this industry to really not delve too deeply into one's views on abortion, because that drives people away. It's a very sensitive topic towards people on both the left and the right. Even those on the right disagree on this issue sometimes, but I'm not afraid, and quite frankly, I don't really give a crap whether someone's offended at my viewpoints or not. I'm not saying that there are never times that you just kind of keep things to your inside voice, but when it comes to something like, I don't know, life and living, I'm kind of just going to go ahead and say it. So I don't know if I've really shared my viewpoints on abortion before, but I'll just tell you just real quick before I get into the story, just so you know where I'm coming from in my worldview. I tend to be an absolutist when it comes to abortion, meaning I believe that abortion is murder. Now that doesn't mean that I believe that any woman who has an abortion is a murderer and should be prosecuted as a murderer. I'm just saying I believe that is a murder. That is intentionally taking the life of an innocent human being. It is evil. I'm also someone who doesn't hold any exceptions to abortion. For instance, for one thing, you got to be careful too, because when people bring up this whole argument of, what about the case of rape and incest? Well, first of all, that's a false scenario for one thing, because has that happened? Yes, but that is a very rare case. So to bring up something that is extraordinarily rare and make that your defining argument, your counter argument, I think is false. I think is ridiculous. But even in that case, no, I don't believe one wrong justifies another wrong. If I believe that abortion is murder, if I believe that abortion is evil, that killing an innocent child is evil, then I have to believe it's evil, period. No exceptions. So, yeah, I don't hold exceptions when it comes to that. I know that can be easy for me to say because you're not a dad, you're not, your wife isn't on the line, her health isn't on the line. Maybe so. But I just don't see any justification for that whatsoever. To me, that is a huge topic. That is a huge issue. That's extremely important to me. And it relates to my worldview as a Christian, which is the most important worldview that I have. I have yet to find any justification through Scripture in that. But anyway, with that being said, here's the story. An abortionist in New York is on trial for a botched attempt at a dismemberment abortion. Robert Rowe is the name of the abortionist. And his patient, 30-year-old Jamie Morales, died after a attempted abortion in 2016. Now, interestingly enough, there's no media present at this trial, other than a pro-life activist Lauren Handy in the courtroom of Judge Gregory Lassac at the Queen's Supreme Court, and is reporting the events of the courtroom to Operation Rescue. Rowe is charged with second-degree manslaughter. Now, here's basically what happened. So, it's a botched abortion, dismemberment, and basically the abortion doctor sped up the process. You have to give the patient, for this kind of abortion especially, you have to give the patient a certain type of drug, a couple of different types of drugs, anesthesia too. You have to go through all these processes to make sure that it doesn't bode terribly for the mother of this baby. Well, the abortion doctor, didn't do that, just rushed through it, and even though the woman, Miss Morales, showed clear signs of sickness, she was bleeding too, and the doctor wasn't able to get rid of the bleeding, so he just basically stitched up her private part, and basically she bled inside, and it was just flooding with blood on the inside of her, and he never fixed it. Sent her home, and she later died. And that's the gist of the story. Now, this, apparently, according to Handy, this doctor has a history of violations. On April 23rd, day 10 of the trial, lead prosecutor Brad A. Leventhal called Paula Breen, deputy director of the Office of Professional Medical Conduct, to the stand. She testified that she has been investigating Rowe since 2013 for infractions involving sedation and office staff. She stated that she had sent 3 letters concerning their violations to Rowe in May 2014, March 2015, and December of 2015, and that Rowe failed to respond to those letters. In addition, in July of 2016, just months before Morales' death, Breen accompanied police during a search of Rowe's abortion facility. There, they found a cabinet of sedation medications used in later-term abortion procedures, but they were unable to locate laminaria sticks or misoprostol, both of which are used often in second trimester abortions. A detective that was present during the search testified to this, which indicates that rather than taking 2 days to perform the abortion, allowing the cervix to properly dilate, Rowe rushed the abortion, attempting to complete it in 1 day. The defense showed the detective a crime scene photo that included white boxes which were said to contain laminaria sticks. Now this is an interesting part too. There's an issue of forged anesthesia records. The second witness, anesthesiologist Dr. Arap D., took to the stand to testify as an expert in anesthesiology. Dr. D stated that he feels Morales' anesthesia report could have been forged because it didn't accurately represent what the average patient's vital signs would be, and that it was nearly impossible for a person to have the numbers that were on Morales' medical records. He continued to say that neither Rowe nor any of his staff are certified anesthesiologists. Therefore, for Rowe to administer anesthesia while simultaneously committing an abortion without properly trained staff on hand to monitor the patient's vitals during the procedure would be a gross deviance of medical practice standards. So, this doctor and his staff were not certified to give anesthesia, which is a central thing that you have to give a patient to do this kind of procedure. He wasn't certified. I mean, if you get your wisdom teeth taken out, which I'm going to have to get mine taken out, next year, the person who gives you anesthesia, they have to be certified in that. You can't just get anyone to just give you anesthesia willy-nilly. They have to be certified to be able to do that. So I have to go to an oral surgeon because he can give anesthesia. I can't just go to my regular dentist. But that's just the difference right there. Well, this person, when you're talking about an abortion, these people on the left who talk about safe, legal, and rare. Well, this wasn't safe. What was safe about this? Now, there's disturbing video of Morales. What sounds to be a disturbing video was played for the jury. It showed Morales wheeled into the hallway. Morales, again, this woman that died, she was wheeled into the hallway at 6:03 p.m. with her head tilted back and her eyes closed. She remained unresponsive as the staff wiped her face. Her vitals were not checked during this time, and a few minutes later, as someone attempted to give her water, her head fell back again. Vitals remained unchecked. Morales was released into the care of her sister less than 30 minutes later. But on watching the video, Dr. D stated that Morales should have not been discharged in that condition. Oh, you think? And the autopsy photos showed, according to an abortionist by the name of Stephen Chasen, Dr. Stephen Chasen, he said that, first of all, he's committed hundreds of abortions, and he testified that laminaria, dilators, and misoprostol are needed together to prep the cervix for a late-term abortion, and stated that medical records indicate that Rowe only used dilators. So he didn't use, like I said, he didn't use all that he was supposed to use. Morales' autopsy photos were shown to Chasen, who explained her injuries included a lacerated uterus and uterine artery, as well as a deep cut into her vagina and a slice through her cervix. And this part just just horrifies me. She was bleeding so severely that Roe brought her back into the procedure room to attempt to stop the bleeding, but failed and wound up cinching her cervix shut, which basically created a dam that held the bleeding inside. And it just pooled inside her abdomen. The baby's remains. So the child's head was decapitated, and the arms were partially detached. He showed the injury an X-ray. He showed the jury an X-ray. This doctor by the name of Dr. Bradley Adams, a forensic anthropologist, stating that those bones formed during the 24th to 26th weeks of pregnancy, the baby's ankle and heel. He also measured the child's pelvis and stated that it also indicated a gestational age of 24 to 26 weeks. Roe's ultrasound confirmed that the preborn baby was 25.1 weeks, or nearly 6 months old. It goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. If convicted, Roe could face up to 15 years in prison, which seems like a light sentence to me. Seems like a light sentence. But it seems that stories about abortionists who kill women just aren't very popular with the mainstream media. And that seems to be the case with many of these stories because it doesn't fit their agenda. They can't talk about this because that will make them look bad. It will make their agenda look bad for continuing the procedure of abortion, child killing. This is really disturbing. It's really grotesque. And the reason I think this is such an incredibly important story, well, for one, is because it's not being covered by the mainstream media, so that says a lot about them, but it also says a lot about us. It says a lot about us, because how can Republican voters claim to be so pro-life, so concerned about the life of an unborn baby, yet not mention anything about the fact that the president, his administration, Congress gave Planned Parenthood another $500 million. Not much of a peep about that. Well, what about the left? What about all of us, whether you're Republican or Democrat? We don't treat the issue of abortion seriously. We think it's just some procedure, and they just die peacefully inside the mother's womb, and it's not a life. It's not a life at all. No, it's not. The fact that this type of abortion, forget abortion in and of itself, which is in and of itself grotesque and it's evil, but when you're talking about late-term abortion, 26 weeks, I mean, that's clearly a life inside that womb. Clearly. And you cut the head off, partially dismember their arms and legs. How anyone could do that and still sleep at night is beyond me. How anyone could voluntarily kill an innocent life like that. A helpless life. I will never understand that. Ever. I'll never understand it. And I am so sick of the politics. I am so sick of it. I don't care if you support the president or not. I don't care if the president was Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. Heck, I don't care if it was Ted Cruz. If Planned Parenthood got $500 million under his administration, you better believe I'd be calling him out on that. Not because he's a Republican, not because he's a conservative, not for none of those reasons, but because these are lives we're talking about. The future generations are being slaughtered in what used to be a moral Christian nation. But now we are helping lead the charge in this. How could we dare call ourselves a righteous nation? How could we dare call ourselves the greatest nation on earth? How arrogant have we become if we allow this to take place in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities, and we make every excuse in the book, because in the end, it's all about me. It's all about us. What I get out of it. It's inconvenient for me, so therefore, I'll just get rid of it. It's fine. You don't hear them wailing. You don't hear them crying, so they don't feel anything. It's fine. It's not a life. No, it's not. It's not. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the Blake Johnson program. We have some just wonderful news to share with you about Amazon. Amazon with a smile. So, the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a prominent Christian legal group, has been barred from participating in the Amazon Smile charitable program, reported by the Daily Caller. Through this program, nonprofit organizations can recoup a small amount of what their supporters spend on Amazon. The ADF specializes in First Amendment law and has won cases at the Supreme Court level. So this is not just some ragtag group. This is a prominent, really big group. Although ADF can't participate, Amazon grants access to an anti-Semitic Islamic group that has allegedly called the killing of all Jewish people. Now, you might ask yourself, how would a company decide to do this? What would be the criteria for them to decide to ban a group like this while also allowing a bigoted, evil, racist group, anti-Semitic group? Well, you see, Amazon doesn't exactly make it themselves. They refer to a group known as the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a prominent, very liberal, progressive, I think bigoted group. Very Marxist, very, very much against freedom of speech when it comes to speech they don't like. And they're the ones that not only define for Amazon what is a hate group, but they are also one of the groups that is on the charity itself. They're part of this event that's taking place. So they do business with Amazon, and they also refer to what is a hate group. So conflict of interest, maybe? I don't know. Now, an Amazon spokesperson said all nonprofits are eligible as long as they meet our participation agreement. As part of that participation agreement, we also state that Amazon relies on the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control and the Southern Poverty Law Center to determine which charities are eligible. And they are being accused by the CEO of ADF, Michael Ferris, of giving too much authority to SPLC. Oh, yeah, this is just wonderful. Just simply wonderful. And again, SPLC is both a member of the Amazon Smile program, as well as deciding whether others can participate. So, yet again, conservatives, Christians, are under attack simply for what they believe. And even though you're not saying or doing anything hateful, in fact, you're doing a lot of good for people, just because you believe a certain way, well, that means we have to shut you down. Welcome to freedom! This is what democracy looks like. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll let you know if there are any updates on this story. Hopefully they are. Hopefully Amazon comes to their senses, but I doubt it. But we'll see. Hope you have a great week. Hope you find some time to enjoy yourself with your family, and enjoy Mother's Day coming up next weekend. Take care. We'll see you back here Monday. God bless.